All right, well, you asked for it. Let's practice some multiple choice questions for APUSH. This is an official practice exam published by the College Board, and if you want to follow along, you can either look at it on the screen or you can download it at the link in the description. And all these questions, I'm not going to take the time to read them out, so pause it when you see it on the screen and read it for yourself. Do the questions for yourself, because only in that way will you really start to get better at these. Okay, here's the first stimulus, so go ahead and pause it and read it. Now, the first thing you should do with any stimulus, bar none, is start with the attribution. Here we see it's from the Seneca Falls Convention, the Declaration of Sentiments and Resolutions, 1848. Now, here's the thing. If you know what the Declaration of Sentiments is, and you should because it's mentioned in the CED, and you know the date, 1848, you could actually answer these questions that follow without even reading the stimulus. Now, I don't exactly recommend that, but I'm just telling you that if you know what the attribution is, then you know a lot already without even reading the stimulus, and that is going to save you some time. So the second thing you need to do is quickly read through the stimulus and mark up the important parts. Here I'm going to mark the elective franchise, which she has no voice, the elective franchise again, and all right in property. This little excerpt is all about how women have been denied certain rights, especially in this case, the elective franchise, which is to say the right to vote in American society. And that level of analysis is all I need to know. I don't need to go into depth here. I just need to understand the main gist. Okay, now here's the first question. The ideas expressed in the excerpt most directly challenge the prevailing ideal in the early 19th century that. Now, before I go any further, I want to mark up the question itself. I want to underline directly challenge. So that means one of these answers is going to challenge what the Declaration of Sentiments and Resolutions is saying, and I need to find out which one that is. Would it be A, that women should enjoy full and equal rights with men? Now that's tricky because that is what this document is saying, that women should have full and equal rights with men. But notice what the question says, which of these directly challenges what the document is saying? So it can't be A because A is agreeing with what the document is saying. Is it C, the ability of women to earn wages was a positive development? And again, this one is tricky because obviously the authors of the Declaration would agree that women earning wages is a positive development, but that is not challenging what she is saying, what they are saying in this document. Or would it be D, women should educate their children about the rights and responsibilities of citizenship? Now, that of course is something that occurs in American history, but that is outside the time period. What we're talking about here is the Republican motherhood, the idea that women should raise up their sons to be good citizens. But that's really a post-American Revolution phenomenon, so that is not the answer. The answer is B, women should focus on the home and domestic sphere. The Declaration of Sentiments is directly challenging the idea that women should stay home and make their husbands sandwiches. Okay, next question. Which of the following developments in the second half of the 19th century? I'm always going to underline the time periods that they give me because I need to focus there and make sure that I'm answering within that time period. Which of the following developments best represents the continuation of the ideas expressed in the Declaration? I'm also always going to underline the historical thinking skill that they're asking me to perform. So in this case, it is continuity. Which of these ideas is continuing later in the 19th century? Is it B, women's support for the social gospel? I mean, yes, women did support the social gospel, but again, that is outside the time period because that's the first half of the 20th century. Was it C, support for outlawing the production and sale of alcohol? I mean, that again is tricky because women did participate in the temperance movement, but again, that is outside the time period. The emphasis for the temperance movement is in the beginning of the 20th century, not the last half of the 19th century. Or is it D, a movement focused on religious revivals and personal conversion? That's another one that's outside the time period. It's asking me about the second half of the 19th century, and the religious revivals that you learned about, the First Great Awakening, the Second Great Awakening, all happened before that. So the answer is A, the formation of voluntary organizations and reform efforts. There were a lot of reform movements cropping up in the second half of the 19th century, and women were deeply involved in those primarily because they could not vote, and so this was the way that they affected change. Okay, now let's move to another set of questions, and this set of questions is attached to a different kind of stimulus, namely a visual stimulus, in this case a graph. So when I'm getting oriented to a stimulus like this, there are a couple of things I want to do first. Now the first thing you're going to be tempted to do is start looking at this line and trying to interpret what it means, but that's not the first thing you do. The first thing you do is you look at the title of the graph. This line is going to indicate the number of immigrants coming to the United States between 1820 and 1860. So before I even look at any questions, the only thing I really need to pay attention to is the fact that in this period right here, there seems to be a huge upsurge in immigrants. And that's enough to look at the first question. Which of the following was a significant cause? Okay, I'm going to underline that because that's the historical thinking skill. What was the significant cause of the trend from 1843 to 1854 shown in the graph? Okay, now at this point, you're going to be under pressure, so make sure you mark those dates on the graph so that you know what you're talking about. Here's 1843, here's 1854. Okay, between those years, why are so many immigrants coming to America? Is it the active encouragement of migration by the United States government? If you know anything about United States history, you know that is rarely, if ever, the case. Is it incentives offered by United States companies looking to hire skilled migrants? Here I just want to point out that it says skilled migrants. That can't be right because most of the immigrants coming into work were unskilled laborers who worked in factories, so that can't be right. Is it the adoption of free trade policies by European governments? Now ultimately that's outside the time period. That's going to happen later. Europe is still at this point still hanging hanging on to the remnants of mercantilism. They are in transition, but the transition has not completed yet. The answer is B, economic and political difficulties in Germany and Ireland. Remember that Germans were coming over because of the failed revolution of 1848, and the Irish were coming over because of the Irish potato famine, so that's why you get all these immigrants coming over during this period. Okay, next question. Which of the following was a direct effect of the trend in immigration after 1845 shown in the graph? Okay, now this is kind of the opposite of the previous question. The other question asked what caused all of this. Now, what are the effects of all of this? Is it A, an increase in sectional tensions? In almost every case when we're in this time period, when we talk about sectional tensions, we're talking about the tension of slavery between the North and the South. So it definitely can't be that. Was it B, did all these immigrants coming in affect a major economic downturn? Here they might be talking about the Panic of 1837 or the Panic of 1857, but in either case, neither of those are true because immigrants actually helped the economy, didn't hurt it. Now the tricky one is D, the collapse of the second party system. This did happen right about the same time, but that happened because of the tension in the North and the South over slavery, not because of immigration. So the answer is C, an upsurge in nativist sentiment. Remember that nativism was a reaction against immigrants, and so that's clearly the answer here. Okay, the next question. The main trend shown in the graph was most directly associated. All right, stop for a second. When you see language like that, something that most directly caused something else, or something most directly associated with something else, that should be an alarm bell in your head that says every answer that I'm about to see is actually correct factually. They're just asking me which one has the tightest association, so you gotta be careful. Okay, so the main trend shown in the graph was most directly associated with which of the following processes occurring in the United States at the time? Is it A, the convergence of European and American cultures? Well, no. During this time, America is actually trying to distinguish itself culturally from Europe. Is it C, the displacement of American Indians from the Southeast? Now, that's also outside of this time period. That happened before the time period we're looking at here. But also, the displacement of American Indians actually has nothing to do with immigration. So we're trying to find out what is most directly associated. It can't be this. Was it D, the resurgence of evangelical Protestantism? Again, that's outside the time period of the question. We're talking about the Second Great Awakening here, and so that can't be it. Remember, we're trying to make an association between the spike in immigration and something else that's going on that encourages that immigration. So the answer is B, the emergence of an industrialized economy. With all the new industrial jobs opening up, that created an incentive for immigrants to come and find work. Okay, so let me summarize the tips of what we've learned through this exercise. Number one, make sure you are studying in the context of your time period. Think about how many of these wrong answers were wrong because they were outside the time period that we were considering. Number two, always read the attribution of the stimulus first. In some cases, you could answer the questions just by reading the attribution. Third, make sure you are marking up the question because when you're under pressure, you are dumber than you think, and that is going to help you. And fourth, just remember, in order to get yourself into the range of a passing score, you only need to get about 55-ish% correct on the multiple choice, and then you have to go on and do well on the writing sections, but don't stress too much. Okay, now the multiple choice is only one section on your exam. Here's some videos that are going to help you with the writing sections. I hope that helped, and I'll see you around. Heimler out.